A quiet evening, a familiar knock, and a few unexpected words from someone I barely knew changed the way I looked at connection and timing. What happened after the pizza was delivered stayed with me longer than the taste ever could. Before we begin, I'd love to know where you're watching from tonight. What city or state are you listening in from? And if stories like this speak to you, please consider subscribing to the channel and giving the video a like. It helps more than you know, and I'm grateful you're here. Now, let me tell you what happened. That evening started like so many others. The living room was dim except for a single lamp by the window, the kind that softens the edges of everything it touches. Outside, the street was quiet, the kind of quiet that only comes after dinner, when the world seems to pause and take a breath. I had ordered pizza because I didn't feel like cooking, and because sometimes routine feels comforting when life has been asking too many questions. When the doorbell rang, I expected the usual brief exchange. A polite hello, a handoff, a thank you. He'd delivered here before, a few times over the years. I recognized his face, though I couldn't have told you his name. He always looked a little younger than his age, or maybe I was just older than I felt. But this time, after I signed the receipt and thanked him, he hesitated. Not awkwardly, just enough to be noticed. He glanced past me, toward the living room, where the lamp cast long shadows across the walls. "Smells like a peaceful night," he said, almost to himself. It caught me off guard, not because it was bold, but because it was gentle. I smiled and said something simple, like, "I hope so." I expected him to leave then. Instead, he nodded, took a step back, then paused again. "You know," he said, "I don't usually say this, but every time I come here, it feels calm, like the kind of place where someone listens." That was when the moment shifted, not in a dramatic way, just a small turn, like a page being folded differently. I felt seen, not as a woman alone in her living room, but as a person who had built a quiet life, piece by piece. I thanked him again, and he left, or so I thought. A few minutes later, as I was setting the pizza on the table, there was another knock. I opened the door, surprised to see him standing there, holding his cap in his hands. "I'm sorry," he said quickly. "I forgot to give you this." He handed me a small packet of seasoning. Then softer he added, and I wanted to say, "Thank you for being kind. You'd be surprised how much that stays with someone." We talked for a moment longer, just words about the weather, about how the neighborhood had changed over the years. Nothing rushed, nothing crossed a line. Just two people standing at the edge of their own lives, acknowledging each other. After he left, I sat down on the couch, the pizza untouched, and felt something warm settle in my chest. Not excitement, not longing, something steadier. A reminder that connection can arrive quietly, and that even brief moments can matter. That was the night the pizza boy returned to my living room, and what he said stayed with me long after the door closed. The next few days passed more slowly than usual, as if time itself had noticed something had shifted. I went back to my routines, morning coffee by the window, the quiet hum of the television in the evenings, phone calls with my sister that always ended with us laughing about nothing in particular. Still, his words returned to me at odd moments. "You'd be surprised how much that stays with someone." I realized they stayed with me too. It wasn't that I was waiting for him. I told myself that more than once. But when I ordered pizza again the following week, I felt a small flutter of curiosity that made me shake my head at myself. At my age, you learn to recognize those feelings without letting them run the show. The knock came just after 7. When I opened the door, it wasn't him. I felt relieved and oddly disappointed at the same time, which made me laugh once the door was closed. Life has a way of reminding you how human you still are. Later that evening, I carried my plate into the living room and sat in my favorite chair. The lamp glowed, the same soft light, and I thought about how much of my life I'd spent being busy. Work, family, responsibilities. Somewhere along the way, I had learned to keep my world tidy and contained. Safe, calm, maybe a little too quiet. 2 nights later, there was another knock. This time, when I opened the door, he stood there, smiling in that familiar, reserved way. We both recognized the moment instantly. It showed in the pause, the shared breath before either of us spoke. "Looks like I'm back," he said. "So it seems," I replied, and we both smiled. The exchange was simple, but easier than before. Like a second conversation picking up where the first had ended. He mentioned that he'd been delivering in this area for years, that he liked the older neighborhoods because they felt settled, grounded. I told him I'd lived here a long time too, that there was comfort in knowing where everything belonged. Before he left, he asked, carefully, "Do you ever feel like quiet can be loud?" The question surprised me. I considered it honestly. "Sometimes," I said, "but I think it's asking us to listen." He nodded, as if that was exactly the answer he'd hoped for. After he left, I noticed something new. The living room didn't feel empty. It felt present, as though the walls had heard us and were holding on to the sound of it. I realized I wasn't thinking about him as the pizza boy anymore. He was simply someone who had crossed my path and left it a little warmer. That night, I wrote in a journal I hadn't opened in years. Just a few lines about unexpected conversations and the courage it takes to show up as yourself, even briefly. I slept better than I had in a long time. I didn't know where any of this was leading. I wasn't trying to define it, but I felt awake in a way I hadn't in years, and for now, that felt like enough. By the third time he came by, I stopped pretending it was coincidence. I hadn't ordered pizza because I was hungry. I ordered it because part of me was curious about what might be said next, and what that might reveal about me. When I opened the door, he greeted me by name. That surprised me more than it should have. It meant I wasn't just another address on his route. It meant he paid attention. "You always seem thoughtful," he said, handing me the box. "Like you're in the middle of remembering something important." I laughed softly. At my age, that could be anything. He smiled, then grew a little more serious. "My dad used to say that the second half of life is really about understanding the first." That landed somewhere deep. I stepped aside slightly, not inviting him in, but making space for the conversation to breathe. The living room light spilled into the hallway, and for a moment we stood there, 2 people framed by an ordinary evening. We talked about small things that felt big, about change, about how the world moves faster than it used to, and how sometimes that leaves people behind. He shared that he'd taken the delivery job after a long stretch of uncertainty, trying to find his footing again. I told him I'd rebuilt my life more than once, and that each time it took longer but felt truer. There was no rush in our voices, no need to impress, just listening. I realized how rare that had become. Before he left, he said, "You know, most doors open and close without anyone really seeing each other. I'm glad this one didn't." After he walked away, I sat in the living room and let the quiet settle again. It felt different now. Not empty, not loud. Intentional. I thought about how many years I'd spent being strong, being practical, being composed, and how strength, I was learning, also includes letting moments matter. That night, I didn't turn on the television. I sat with my thoughts and felt a sense of gratitude. Not for him exactly, but for the reminder that discovery doesn't end at a certain age. It just changes shape. I didn't know what the next knock would bring, but I knew I had answered as myself, fully, and without fear. The last time he came by, it was earlier than usual. Late afternoon light filled the living room, revealing dust motes drifting like they had nowhere else to be. I remember thinking how honest daylight can feel, how it doesn't hide much, and maybe that was fitting. When I opened the door, he didn't have a pizza box in his hands, just a small paper bag and a thoughtful expression. "I'm off delivery starting tomorrow," he said. Different job, different hours. I felt the news more than I expected. Not loss exactly, but the closing of something gentle and unfinished. I nodded, letting the moment settle between us. I didn't want to disappear without saying goodbye, he added. These talks, they mattered to me. I told him they mattered to me too. And that surprised me, how easily the truth came out when there was nothing left to protect. We stood there, not trying to extend the moment, just honoring it. He thanked me again for listening, for being open. I thanked him for reminding me that connection doesn't have an age limit, and that sometimes it arrives disguised as routine. Before he left, he said something I'll always remember. Some people come into your life to stay. Others come to wake you up. After the door closed, I sat in my chair and looked around the living room. Same furniture, same lamp, same quiet street outside, but I wasn't the same. I felt steadier, more present in my own life. I didn't need anything more from the experience. It had already given me what I didn't know I was missing. A reminder that respect can be felt instantly. That being seen doesn't require a long story. And that growth can happen in the smallest spaces. That evening, I made dinner instead of ordering in. I ate slowly, savoring not just the food, but the calm confidence settling inside me. Some moments don't ask to be continued. They ask to be remembered. And I remember this one clearly.